Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and our biggest update this year so far for Marvel Studios' Spider-Man 4 has us wondering, could this be a mutant story, a doomsday multiverse story, or just a Spider-Man story? Sadie Sink was confirmed by Deadline to be co-starring with Tom Holland in the follow-up film to Spider-Man No Way Home that's coming next year, the fourth film of the series, directed by Shang-Chi director Destin Daniel Cretton, a Sony Marvel Studios co-production that will follow Tom Holland's Peter Parker in the midst of the MCU events of Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, in a version of the MCU Manhattan where he's once again an anonymous hero, hopefully working for the Daily Bugle now. In this video, I'm going to break down everything we know about this film and what role Sadie Sink will most likely be playing. Now, we have some great Marvel-themed shirts and stress pillows available at nerdriot.shop, our merch store. I've been hugging the crap out of these things in this stressful year, and grabbing something from our merch store is a really great way to support our channel. Thank you. Okay, on March 12th, Deadline reported that with production for Spider-Man 4 set to begin later this year, Sadie Sink will be joining the cast. Sadie Sink plays Max Mayfield on Stranger Things and really emerged in the fourth season as the haunted focal character for the Kate Bush running up that hill sequence. She also appeared in Darren Aronofsky's The Whale and in Taylor Swift's 2021 short film All Too Well, a song and music video which I actually broke down in a Twitter thread as having a ton of references to the history of the Spider-Man films. The gist is the song is really about Taylor Swift's relationship with Jake Gyllenhaal, who was nearly cast as Spider-Man in Spider-Man 2 when Tobey Maguire is having contract disputes with Sony, and the short film features Sadie Sink reenacting the upside down kiss that MJ in Spider-Man 2 does with John Jameson to see if he kisses as well as the last guy did. Anyway, that's it. That's all you need to know about it. But this Deadline report says that Amy Pascal and Marvel president Kevin Feige are producing this fourth Spider-Man film. Amy Pascal, as part of her outgoing deal with Sony, produces all the Spider-Man films through her production company, Pascal Pictures. This Deadline article also says, as for who Sink will be playing, the prevailing theory is that she'll be introduced as X-Men character Jean Grey, but don't count out the idea that she shows up as another beloved redheaded Spider-Man character. So that prevailing theory came from scooper Jeff Snyder, who was quick to run some victory laps claiming he was the first person to fan cast a rising star from Netflix's biggest title in a highly anticipated Marvel role. But Jean Grey remains an option that we should consider, especially given the type of role Sadie Sink played as Max on Stranger Things Season 4. When you break down the 5 options of characters Sadie Sink could be playing in this fourth Spider-Man movie, you realize that each option really reshapes what type of movie this could be. And when you look at the options through that lens, I think we can narrow down who Sadie Sink is likeliest to play. Option 1, Jean Grey, an Omega level mutant with psychic telepathy and telekinesis, a reality warper, a love interest to Scott Summers, one half of her doppelganger Madeline Pryor. Jean Grey is one of the most important characters Marvel Studios will be seeking to cast in their upcoming mutant saga after Avengers Secret Wars. If Jean Grey appears in a Spider-Man film, that film will immediately be considered the first real chapter of Marvel's multiverse saga. It will really turn the movie into a mutant film, an X-Men film in all possible ways. And that's a big deal, because in his newsletter after the announcement, Jeff Snyder noted that if an X-Men character like Jean Grey appears in Spider-Man 4, that would, quote, require Sony to give Lauren Schuler Donner a producing credit and fee, which Sony would be unlikely to agree to. Donner wasn't mentioned in Deadline story alongside producers Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal. And Snyder is correct on that point. Lauren Schuler Donner is an example of what I've called a legacy producer that I actually went into in this video as someone who was so instrumental to the movie versions of these characters even existing that they legally get executive producer credit and payments for any movie these characters show up in. That's why in Deadpool and Wolverine, in the opening credits, Kevin Feige's producer credit showed up alongside Lauren Schuler Donner's. And to be clear, Lauren Schuler Donner totally deserves that credit. She was really the producer mind behind Superman director and her husband Richard Donner's production company in the 80s and 90s. And that's why Kevin Feige, when he graduated from USC and started working for the Donner company, even though Richard Donner, as a director of Superman, was the director he most admired, he ended up choosing to work on the desk of Lauren Schuler Donner. That's how Kevin Feige got his foot in the door when this company produced the 2000 X-Men film. Now, what has not yet been mentioned with Jean Grey is that it's also possible that Bryan Singer might get a legacy producer credit too. I speculated that that might be a reason behind the X-Men delay and why Marvel Studios might be finding ways around including X-Men in the titles of these films. And Sadie Sink is so talented, she could play one hell of a Jean Grey. Now, as part of Marvel Studios' deal with Sony, every Spider-Man movie that they work on together has to feature some top-tier MCU character to team up with Peter Parker. In Spider-Man Homecoming, it was Tony Stark. In Spider-Man Far From Home, it was Nick Fury. In Spider-Man No Way Home, it was Doctor Strange. But all three of them were previously established characters in past films. And I don't think Marvel Studios would use this fourth Spider-Man movie, for which they have to share the profits with Sony, to introduce a critical new MCU character. Also, for what it's worth, My Time to Shine a Hello claims Sadie Sink is not playing Jean Grey. And they're never wrong. Option 2, Mary Jane Watson. This was the other redhead hinted at in the Deadline article, Well, the issue with this is the 616 universe already has an MJ played by Zendaya. Her character's name is Michelle Jones, but Spider-Man No Way Home's first act media montage confirmed her last name was Jones Watson. So if Spider-Man 4 were to introduce a Mary Jane Watson in the 616 universe, it would have to be a Mary Jane from another universe. Now, the multiverse is not completely out of the question because this fourth Spider-Man movie is coming out the same summer as Avengers Doomsday, and between that movie and Avengers Secret Wars. And if Spider-Man is going to be in those movies, I don't see how this Spider-Man movie doesn't at least reference those events. Today's video is brought to you by Blue Chew. We've all heard the phrase, in like a lion, out like a lamb.
I'm so confused.
It's a bit of folkloric meteorology about how March starts off with wintry bluster and winds up with gentle spring. But if you instantly thought of how your ability to perform sexually came in like a lion in your youth and has been slowly going the way of the lamb ever since, you might want to check out Blue Chew. Blue Chew is the unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. It's super easy too. Just sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. It's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. You can take Blue Chew anytime, day or night. That way you can plan ahead or be ready for whenever an opportunity arises. If you're skeptical and don't think you need it, try it free for a month and see. Make life easier by getting harder and discover your options at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our viewers. Try your first month of Blue Chew free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information, and we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring our channel. I also doubt that Sadie Sink will be playing Mary Jane Watson because Tom Holland said that he and Zendaya read the script for Spider-Man 4 together and that they just loved it. This according to Holland's interview in the Rich Roll podcast earlier this year.
But the writers are doing a great job, and I read it 3 weeks ago, and it really lit a fire in me. Zendaya and I sat down and read it together, and we at times were bouncing around the living room this is a real movie worthy of the fans' respect. But there's a few things we need to figure out before we can get that really going.
Actually, earlier in this interview, Holland also slipped that he knew about Robert Downey Jr.'s return as Dr. Doom before it was announced at San Diego Comic-Con.
I've been speaking to Downey a lot, especially about him making his return, which is super exciting. He's back.
He's gone on that exploration, and he still came back to do more.
That was a tough secret to sit on, because I have a reputation for ruining things, and I strategically have done no press.
And I have always found that weird, because for Marvel Studios to reveal that to Tom Holland before revealing it to people like Benedict Cumberbatch, because Benedict Cumberbatch said that he had to text fight for that announcement was made, this just tells us that Robert Downey Jr.'s Dr. Doom is probably going to cameo in Spider-Man 4, maybe in a post-credit scene, but it tells us that the multiverse will at least touch that movie in some way. I just don't think we're going to get a multiversal Mary Jane Watson. I don't think Zendaya would read that script with her fiance and be like, yeah, great, they're gonna replace my character with some white girl. So option 3, Angelica Angel Jones, aka Firestar. Some Marvel fans are pitching Sadie Sink as Firestar because Firestar is 1/3 of the early 1980s animated series Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, with Spider-Man, Firestar, and Iceman, Bobby Drake. But the issue with that would be Bobby Drake is of course another mutant. And with that, we would get back into that X-Men Legacy producer issue. That said, I do think Bobby Drake would make a really good gateway mutant to Marvel Studios' mutant saga. What do I mean by gateway mutant? Well, every X-Men franchise begins through the eyes of a gateway mutant, a runaway mutant who gets taken in by the X-Men and then goes from an outsider to an insider. For the 90s X-Men animated series, that gateway mutant was Jubilee. For the 2000 X-Men film, it was really 2 gateway characters, Wolverine and Rogue. For X-Men 97, Roberto da Costa Sunspot became that character in the earlier episodes. And when Fox tried to pivot to a new future in its later films after X-Men Days of Future Past crossover event, they did try to make Jean Grey a gateway character in the Sophie Turner version of the character. Had Dark Phoenix not underperformed and had Fox not sold to Disney, Simon Kinberg's plan at the time was to pursue a Mr. Sinister Goblin Queen storyline in that future, similar to what we ended up seeing in X-Men 97 episode 2. So as we've been keeping our eyes on the early clues Marvel Studios has planted for their mutant saga, who will be their gateway mutant? Kamala Khan? Billy Kaplan? His brother Tommy, coming in the Vision Quest series most likely? Or could it be someone like Bobby Drake, Iceman? Either way, I just don't think Sadie Sink is playing Firestar. Option 4, Felicia Hardy, Black Black Cat. We have to remember that Spider-Man 4 is a Sony production, and aside from the established MCU character that Marvel Studios lends to the story, all the other casting is handled by Sony. All the contracts are signed with Sony, and I think odds are Sadie Sink is going to play a Marvel character that Sony owns the rights to. And Black Cat, Felicia Hardy, is a character Sony has been trying to get into a movie for a long time. Black Cat is a cat burglar in Peter Parker's life over the decades across all media. Sam Raimi considered featuring Felicia Hardy in his era of the Spider-Man films, especially for his never-produced 2011 Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 4 that I made a very fun and crazy video about here. And in one version of that Spider-Man 4, Felicia would have been Adrian Toome's daughter, Vultress. And in March 2013, Sam Raimi said that Anne Hathaway would have played Black Cat if Spider-Man 4 had been made.
On the Spider-Man front, like, did you read a script? Like, how did you get into costume? Like, how close did that come?
Did not get into costume and did not read a script past the audition sites.
Maybe he just had Anne Hathaway's Selena Kyle, Catwoman, on his brain from The Dark Knight Rises. Felicity Jones played Felicia Hardy in Mark Webb's The Amazing Spider-Man 2, working for Harry Osborn at Oscorp, and she was being set up to be Black Cat in future films, but Sony ended up really canceling that era of films. And then in March 2017, Sony announced that they were developing a Black Cat Silver Sable team-up movie, later titled Silver and Black, with Gina Prince Blythewood attached to it, but that project never made it out of development hell. I just think it's worth bringing up this history because Sony always has a weird way of bringing in their long hoped for characters and subplots even in later eras and just kind of like willing these things into existence. Like they wanted Lizard as the villain of Sam Raimi's never produced Spider-Man 4, and when Sam Raimi left, Lizard was still the villain of Mark Webb's 2012 The Amazing Spider-Man. They teased Rhino and Kraven the Hunter at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and they brought back both characters just with new versions in the Kraven movie. So I just guarantee you that there's someone at Sony, maybe Avi Arad, who's like, oh, we gotta get Black Cat in there. But I'm just saying, Black Cat, look at any of the art people post of that character on social media, and I just don't think that they would make Sadie Sink do this. So I think that leaves one clear, obvious option. Option 5, it's Gwen Stacy, right? Gwen Stacy. Since Sony co-produces these films with Marvel Studios and they split the profits, they need these films to be billion-dollar successes for it to be worth their production efforts. They need their Spider-Man movies to be spider-focused, to restate their legal claims over the most popular characters that they own, and to justify their abilities to continue with spin-offs of those characters. And after the two Into the Spider-Verse movies, Gwen Stacy is on a whole new level of popularity. And it is in Sony's legal interest and profit interest to cast live-action versions of both Gwen Stacy and Miles Morales as soon as possible. And I think that's the plan here. Like, one path to making certain that Spider-Man 4 is a billion-dollar movie is to team up Tom Holland's Peter Parker with a live-action Gwen Stacy and a live-action Miles Morales. And if they also are going to get an MCU hero per their deal with Marvel Studios, Daredevil Matt Murdock is right there. Like, this is going to be a New York story. Peter Parker is back to being an anonymous Spider-Man. With Daredevil Born Again, we're getting to know the MCU versions of Manhattan. And for everything we know about Spider-Gwen, Sadie Sink is perfect for that character. You could see her rocking the teal Converses and the teal ballet slippers, drumming in a band, the Mary Janes. And for anyone who's just weirdly obsessed with hair color in this conversation, actors are able to dye their hair or wear wigs and extensions. They do it all the time. The past two live-action Gwen Stacy's, Bryce Dallas Howard and Emma Stone, both dyed their hair blonde for the role. This would also mean Spider-Man 4 would be likelier to cast a live-action Miles. They even seemed to indicate that that was going to happen in the scene with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Electro, when they talked about there being a black Spider-Man somewhere out there. And we know a Miles Morales already exists in the MCU when Donald Glover as Prowler Aaron Davis in Spider-Man Homecoming referred to having a nephew whom he called Miles in a deleted scene. And the recent episode of Daredevil Born Again mentioned an Officer Morales who testified in favor of the White Tiger vigilante. And some are thinking this could be a reference to Miles's father. Now, before you say that Miles's father's last name was Davis, Jefferson Davis, in recent comics, Miles' dad legally changed his name to Morales because he wanted to move on from the baggage he got as SHIELD agent Jefferson Davis. And he also didn't know why his parents named him after the Confederate leader Jefferson Davis. Also, in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Miles' dad now goes by Jeff Morales. He took the last name of his wife, Rio. Now, I don't know if the Officer Morales in Daredevil Born Again episode 3 is Miles' dad per se, but we don't see him on screen. And again, we know there is a Miles Morales in the MCU in Brooklyn. So I pose a question to you. Gwen Stacy, Jean Grey, Mary Jane Watson, Felicia Hardy, or Firestar, or someone else? Who do you think Sadie Sink is playing in this movie? Comment down below with your thoughts. Follow me at EA Voss. Subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.